What's up, everyone? Welcome to the first ever all guitar stream. It's just going to be me playing guitar. Just kidding. Let me make sure I have the right audio. I do. Fantastic. Let me share my screen. Share screen. Fantastic. How's everybody doing today? What do people want to talk about? I actually have a lot of stuff to do today, but I probably should be doing my homework right now, but streaming was more of a priority than homework today because I've been grinding on that, but haven't been grinding on streaming as much as I wanted to since our TikTok got banned. Partially because I've been working on a new article, which I just finished today. I finished the second draft. Now I sent it over to Carlos and Noah and some of our other folks so they can edit it. But that'll be coming out soon on the relation between neoclassical economics and postmodernist philosophy, in which I basically argue that they're both the purest expressions of ruling class ideology that can possibly exist in the field of economics and in the field of philosophy. So, hi, Comrade Eddie. Hello, Bjork the pessimist. I'm sorry you're so pessimistic. You're getting so good, man. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I practice pretty much every day. Evening, comrade, or whatever time it is over there in the old US of A. It is 11:27 Central Standard Time in the Midwestern United States. So thank you. It looks like we got Carlos in the chat, sharing some of the important links. Check out the things that Carlos just posted. Recently, the Rail Workers Union called for nationalization, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today. And they actually asked us for an endorsement, which was a huge honor, a huge thing for Midwestern Marx, a huge step in the right direction. And really, for me and Carlos, and as Carlos said, make sure you retweet that and share it around if you can, because it's big for us and big for the class struggle in general. Because obviously we do our thing with political education, philosophical Marxist education, education about the class struggle. But, this is the first time we've really forged a real relationship and are really working together with an organized body of class struggle, an organized body of the working class. So, a worker combination is one of the words we've been using lately. So it's a huge step in the right direction for our country too, which I'm not going to get into too much right now because that's what we're going to cover in the stream today. But yes, we're very, very excited about that. And I hope you all are too, because, it's not just us that make up Midwestern Marx. Obviously, we put out the content, but it's the viewership too, because it's an active process of learning. It's not like we're just providing, meaningless, senseless entertainment for you guys to consume. You have to pay attention to our content if you want to learn from it. You have to engage with it. So there's work that goes in from the viewers. We try and not make it seem like work, but so yeah, y'all are part of this. If you're part of Midwestern Marx, obviously all our Patreon support All our financing and stuff comes from the viewers, and we have viewers who help us with editing, viewers who help us with all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I want you all to feel as excited about this this rail union partnership as we are. Have you talked about socialist Marxist political parties in the U.S.? Yeah, I'm part of CPUSA. I have a lot of critiques of how it's structured and how things work right now. Carlos is part of the Class Unity group that split with DSA. He's been doing some work with them. We like PSL. We work with PSL a lot, so there's good options. Hello, comrades. Hello, State Fishing. Welcome back. Great to see you again. Hello, Yimmy No. Hello, comrades. Going to keep this on in the background whilst I write a history essay. Very cool. Well, good luck with that. I don't know how you can multitask like that, but more power to you. Maybe I'll give you some ideas to write your essay on. See your opinions on Deng and China's Belt and Road Plan. We support them both. We've talked about those before too. Watch our videos on Is China Marxist and the Construction of Modern China. I'm upset leftist comrades didn't go to the East Palestine before Trump. They could have channeled the anger of the residents. Yes, that is something we're going to talk about today. I'm upset leftist comrades didn't go to East Palestine, Ohio before Trump. They could have channeled the anger of the residents. We 100% agree, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to address these super chats, and then we'll get into the segment. But yeah, I mean, Biden's in Ukraine. Biden's in Kiev giving them more weapons. And Trump is in Ohio handing out aid. And obviously it's a PR move. It's a campaign move. But, leftists and socialists should go there if they're able. And, maybe Midwestern Marx should have put, we're right now we're in the process of funding Noah's trip to Pennsylvania, where he's going to meet with some comrades like Anthony Montiero they do like a Sunday school where they teach people about Marxism. So right now we're raising money to pay for Noah's gas and pay for his hotel while he's there and stuff. Otherwise, maybe we would have done that and tried to get people to Ohio. But either way, if you want to support Noah's trip, which is also going to be very important, there is a link on our Twitter to donate a few bucks to help him with that. All right. Thank you so much for the super chat. Speaking of donations, you got 25 bucks worth of super chats here. Really appreciate that. Click, like, and share needed. Yes. Make sure to like and share the stream also. But if the U.S. nationalizes their rail system, what's to stop that money from going to the military and not helping civilians? Great question. Great question. Thank you so much for the super chat, by the way. $20. Hugely helpful to our project. Thank you so much for the support. That makes our project possible. Duck Hash Browns. Cool username also. And, this is partially what we're going to talk about today. But I don't think they will nationalize rail because the government is a dictatorship of capital, right? Our government is a tool of the capitalist class used for the suppression of the working masses. So even if they were to nationalize rail, which I don't see happening, I think they would do it in a way where they can do exactly what you said, funnel it into military spending, funnel it into, corporate handouts, things like that, rather than nationalizing it with a bottom-up structure where the workers are in power. But, I think it's a hypothetical because I think our government's just going to say, no, we're not going to nationalize rail. And the workers don't have the level of organization that they need right now to make that kind of demand. But we're going to talk about that as we get into it. I just wanted to address the super chat because I always try and answer super chat questions. But your question will be answered more so once I get into the segment. Thank you so much for the 20 bucks. I endorse this message. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it. Appreciate your constant support, constant super chat, super stickers, financial support that you're giving to the project. Hey, Eddie, glad you're back streaming. Yeah, you bet. Glad to see you once again. What's up, Eddie? What's up, everyone on Twitch? Good to see you all. Glad we got some Twitch folks checking in. Today, obviously, we've already been talking about it a bit already. But we're going to talk about the recent train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Obviously, this is something that Carlos and Noah already covered, but I would love to cover it myself. Oh, wow, we have a new member. Sorry, I got to pause quick. I think Christopher Bustle might be our very first YouTube member. YouTube just did this thing. They started their membership program, so it's basically like Twitch subscribers. If you become a member on YouTube, you can use like Midwestern Mark's emotes, and you get special privileges and their benefits, like similar to being a Patreon supporter. And we've tried to make our the benefits for Twitch subscribers, YouTube members, and Patreon supporters as even as we can, consistent as we can. So thank you very much for the financial support, Christopher Bustle, and I hope you enjoy the benefits that you get for being a YouTube member. I just edited those the other day. Okay, and $20 too. This is insane. Thank you all for the incredible levels of financial support. Yeah, we're getting a lot. As I always say, y'all make our project possible. We wouldn't be able to fund things like Noah's recent trip to Pennsylvania. We wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't have the equipment that we have. Y'all are what make it possible. Thank you. Thank you. State Fishing too. Wow, look at this. We're getting all sorts of new members. Maybe that'll be a popular thing, having becoming YouTube members. So yeah, I'm glad. For a while, I didn't want to make that an option because we already had the Patreon and Twitch subs, but did it the other day. So I hope people enjoy it and enjoy the benefits and enjoy the emotes that you get. Is there a Gonzalo level? There is not. Ingalls level. Nice. You bet. And how's it going? Happy 65. Good to see you here. All right. Oh, shoot. I forgot to list off the Patreon members. That's one of our new benefits and bonuses. Is if you're a $10 patron, we lift you off as a producer at the start of the stream. So maybe I'll do that at the end, since I've already talked a lot about that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll do that at the end. Shout out to the $10 patrons too. Don't let me forget to do that at the end. Duck Hash Browns is now a member. Everyone's becoming a member. Let's go. Becoming a Midwestern Marks YouTube member is the thing to do. Okay. So now finally beginning our segment on East Palestine, Ohio, and the train derailment. And I will respond to super chats or anybody who becomes a new member, and thank you for that after we finish this segment. Otherwise, I feel like I'm never going to get into the segment here, but thank you all for the support. So obviously had the big train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, which it's important to recognize that this train derailment is part of a larger pattern, right? This wasn't like the first train derailment. There have been a lot of these crashes, these tragic accidents happening, and rail workers have been sounding the alarm about this forever. It's something that personally I've been following pretty closely because I'm actually considering going into an industry like rail and trying to work up through the unions. That'd be a long-term thing, but one of my buddies is doing that right now. One of my buddies is extremely active in the rail union, extremely active in organizing. So he sees what the rail workers' workplace and work conditions are like every day. Obviously, he's a part of the rail workers, and he tells us about it. And they've been talking about this forever. They've been talking about how unsafe it is, how mismanaged it is. The rails are not taken care of. The workers are in incredibly unsafe conditions. They're underpaid. There's no safety regulations. Like I said, the companies are making billions of dollars in profit. Oh my gosh, I just watched the guy fall on his butt on the ice outside. Oh, that poor guy. Oh, sorry, buddy. I hope he's okay. Sorry, that distracted me. But the rail workers have been talking about this forever, right? They've been saying that this is incredibly mismanaged, that these shareholders in Wall Street or on the American coasts aren't even aware of what's going on the railways, right? They're not even aware of the working conditions of their workers. So for those who don't know how it works, the majority shareholders in the company, who are largely located on the coast or on Wall Street or in London in the UK, they are the primary owners of the businesses, right? So if you own a huge amount of shares in that business, you can be on the board of directors or vote for the board of directors, and you have a large say in how the company operates. So what these shareholders have been doing is just cutting production costs, cutting production costs, cutting production costs, because they don't see the workplace. They don't see the everyday labor process of these workers, of the rail unions. All they see is their bottom line. All they see is their profit. And the more that they pay for, things that increase safety, the more that they pay for production costs that are going to keep the rails, functioning without derailments and constant crises, the less profit they're going to make, right? Because then they're going to be spending more money on production. So they've just cut production and their profits have skyrocketed. And they've suppressed the wages of the workers, suppressed the benefits of the workers, to the point where it's now hitting a boiling point, right? To the point where we're having all these crises, especially this one in East Palestine, Ohio, which leaked a bunch of toxic chemicals into the water supply. And instead of responding by helping, the government responded by basically fencing the area off and not letting any journalists in. So now it's become a huge national issue. And what does Donald Trump do as he's starting off his 2024 campaign? He goes and he brings aid, or he goes and he brings Big Macs or whatever, and he starts handing out supplies to people and makes a big media spectacle out of it. And you know where Joe Biden is while Donald Trump is doing all of this? Well, where else would Joe Biden be? Some might think that he would go to East Palestine, Ohio, to make sure his constituents are okay, to make sure that the people he's in charge of taking care of are okay and hand out aid. But instead, he went to his real constituency. He went to Kiev, Ukraine, and pledged a whole bunch of cash and weapons, not for the victims of the chemical spill, not for the people experiencing health issues because of this train derailment, not for the rail workers who have been exploited and had all their safety regulations thrown out. No, but for the U.S. puppet government in Ukraine waging a proxy war against Russia. Has there ever been a national news story or a national incident that is more, that better shows, I can't think of the word, that better exemplifies the Democrats and Joe Biden's priorities than this? Right? There are people who have gastrointestinal bleeding. There are people suffering serious health issues because they drank water that was contaminated by this train derailment. And Biden's first action when this happens is to go to Kiev and promise more weapons and more money, right? As people are criticizing the government's lack of response to the train derailment and their, inability to send relief workers, disaster relief workers, which is surely leading to more harmful effects on the people. So, it exemplifies Biden's priorities, the government's priorities, and it exemplifies really in the Marxist sense better than anything that our government is a dictatorship of capital. It is a dictatorship of capital that works by and for the capitalist class and suppresses the working class. Right? In East Palestine, Ohio, where this train derailed, the working class is suffering. The working masses are suffering. Regular people in the United States, the country that Joe Biden is supposed to be the president of, are suffering. They're experiencing health issues as a result of this accident and as a result of the government's lack of response and their inefficiency in responding. Right? The capitalists, the shareholders on Wall Street who own these companies that caused the train derailment to happen, right? The shareholders who pay for Biden's campaigns through donations and political bribery and super PACs, they want to wage a proxy war against Russia, right? They want to stop these Eastern powers, China and Russia, from rising to prominence anymore economically and challenging the dominance of Western corporations, right? So when an accident happens, a disaster happens, and the working class is suffering, Biden can't even hide his disdain for the working people and, his preference for the corporate America. He goes right to Kiev, Ukraine. Oh, well, those working people will be all right. They've been suffering for a long time. You know, they'll be fine. What's a little more suffering? We got to send more weapons to Ukraine. We got to wage this proxy war against Russia. They're threatening our geopolitical dominance. So everyone is seeing this. This is clear for everyone to see. I was talking about this with someone who's apolitical yesterday. I was just explaining what was going on. They could hardly understand it. But I'm like, our government works for the capitalist class, not the working class. That's all you need to know, right? That's all you need to understand this. So to pull up a couple of videos here so that people know what's going on. This was a video that went fairly viral of someone in East Ohio who drank contaminated water and suffered gastrointestinal bleeding. They made coffee in the morning before they heard that the water was contaminated. They suffered a lot of health effects.
So talk to me about when did you first start noticing anything in terms of your own health, anyone in your family?
The controlled release began on February 6th, which was Monday. It was towards the end of the day, probably, I think it was like between 4 and 5 o'clock is when they initially started doing it. I was outside having my coffee, like I do every night after dinner. And I didn't notice a smell in the air, and I didn't even expect to smell anything being 15 miles away. But I did notice that my coffee tasted unusually bitter. A little bit later, I was back out on my porch, and the coffee still tasting bitter. And then I noticed my lips started feeling numb. The roof of my mouth started feeling numb. My tongue started burning, and my throat started burning.
Wow. At
that point, I went in the house and I got my husband and I said, come out here and smell the air. I said, because I think it smells funny. I could smell a burning smell. He took a big breath in. He said, yeah, I smell something out there. He said it smelled like burning electronics. And then this proceeded 2, maybe 3 more times throughout the night. I would go out, experience the symptoms, come back in, and they would dissipate. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, because it wasn't sticking. Once I went back in the house, like the symptoms would just dissipate. And at that point, I had my tongue just was fried. By the time I woke up the next morning, it felt like I had been scalded, because as I talked to you in our communication prior to right now, I did experience the gastrointestinal bleeding, which I believe was because of the coffee that was oddly bitter.
So there you have it. I'm sure the gastrointestinal bleeding was from the bitter coffee that was completely contaminated with chemicals from the train crash. I like the comment that says, this is terrifying. That's the first thing I thought, because there was water contamination in my town this year, right? There was like a sewage pipe that leaked or something, and they didn't tell us to stop drinking the water until after I had made my coffee and, had a glass of water that I do every morning. Right? So it's like, what if it was, what if it was toxic chemicals that would have caused gastrointestinal bleeding or could have even killed me? This could happen to anyone. This could happen to anyone. We're Midwestern marks. Ohio is part of the Midwest. It's not that many miles away from us. I've been to Ohio a couple times this year already. So this could happen to anyone, and this is the effect of infrastructure deteriorating, right? And our productive base decaying here in the imperial core, which is something Lenin talks about in his book, Imperialism. There's a chapter called The Decay of Imperialism. It talks about how if you just outsource everyone's jobs, and if you're just spending all your country's resources doing imperialism abroad, like Biden being in Ukraine, pledging them more weapons and money, then your infrastructure and your productive base at home is going to deteriorate and the working mass are going to suffer. That is exactly what we're seeing right now. Exactly what we're seeing. And somebody said also, nobody's really covering this right now, which is absolutely something we're going to talk about later, and something that's very true in the West. But first, I just want to show you all a video of what this woman drank. I mean, honestly, I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen this video already because it went quite viral. But the woman who told us she drank this contaminated water in her coffee and got gastrointestinal bleeding, this is what she was drinking.
Wow.
Look at all that.
Look at it.
It's all in the bottom of the creek bed. Now look at it.
That is nasty. That is nasty. It's just filled with chemicals. It's just filled with pollutants. Oh, it's so gross. There were also people who were taking day-by-day videos. And other symptoms of the water contamination. And this, like, notice how none of this is being reported by the news, right? None of this is being reported by the news. It's all being reported by like people on TikTok. Right? Like this issue wouldn't have even blown up if it wasn't for a bunch of TikTok videos that came out about it. Now CBS News is doing a recap, you know, now that it's a national issue and they're kind of being forced to talk about it. But like someone said in the comments earlier, a lot of this stuff is being covered up or swept under the rug by the media. You know, and here's an example. I keep seeing TikTok videos and Twitter videos from people around Ohio showing the rainwater, which also looks like it's contaminated, which looks like it's got chemicals in it. And I've seen repeated examples of these videos. Now, is it possible that people are just claiming acid rain because they know this is a hot button issue? And that, you know, a TikTok claiming that they're experiencing acid rain could go viral? For sure. That's absolutely a possibility. But every article that I've seen about it has been something like this. There's claims of acid rain from the toxic train derailment, but there are reasons to be skeptical, right? As they keep saying with everything, you know, there are reasons to be skeptical that people are actually being poisoned. There's reason to be skeptical that the waterways are actually contaminated. You know, why? I just saw like 3 videos of it, you know, and the media wasn't covering it. You were trying to not let journalists in. The government was trying to not let any journalists in. And then all these TikTok videos and Twitter videos started leaking of what the water looked like. So again, we see a total failure of the U.S. media, which, similar to the government, you know, is nothing but a propaganda arm of the ruling class, of the finance capitalists who control our politicians like Joe Biden and are choosing to wage a proxy war in Ukraine rather than take care of the working people here at home. So I don't know for sure what the deal is with the acid rain. I just think it's interesting that all the major media outlets are saying, you know, don't believe these TikTok and Twitter videos, despite the fact that TikTok and Twitter videos have been, you know, the main reporting that we've gotten about this thing, because the corporate media doesn't care. And then the government's trying to, you know, at least was trying to keep it as hush hush as possible. Clearly that's not going to work because this is such an absurd issue. And, you know, especially the fact that Biden is in Kiev right now. But it's crazy. It's crazy. Another media failure. So now, as we said earlier, before the segment started, the rail workers unions are calling for nationalization of the railroads. They are calling for the railroads to become publicly owned. They're calling for the government to seize the railroads from these corporate shareholders, these people on Wall Street who have no idea, you know, what working in rail is even like, who have just cut production costs, cut safety regulations, cut workers' benefits, cut wages, and have just seen their profits spike, millions and millions of dollars paid out in shareholder dividends each quarter from these railroad companies as their workers suffer and as the rails deteriorate, causing all these crashes. So the workers have now gotten to a boiling point or a breaking point where they're like, we want nationalization of the rail. We want the government to seize the rail industry for us from these shareholders because of the horrible mismanagement and exploitation that they've done. And this is just a huge step. this is a huge step in the class struggle in the U.S. The fact that the unions and the organized workers at the base of the economy in an industry as vitally important to the rest of the economy as rail is, are calling for nationalization, right? Are not just calling for better wages, better benefits. They're saying, no, this whole industry is garbage when it's run by these Wall Street shareholders. It needs to be owned and controlled by the people. And the surplus of this industry shouldn't go into the dividends of shareholders. It should be reinvested in the industry and the workers themselves, or spent on like government welfare programs like healthcare. That is what nationalization represents. It represents public ownership instead of private ownership. And now that is what the working mass in the U.S. is calling for, as the contradictions of capitalism and imperialism are coming to a boiling point, as they're coming to a head. Right? All the workers can see that Biden's in Kiev, Ukraine, handing them our tax dollars and more weapons, while people are suffering in the U.S. and Biden refuses to do much of anything. So this is a huge step, and we wrote an endorsement for the Rail Workers Union, which Carlos shared earlier. And check that out, please, on the Midwestern Marks Twitter. Share it, like it, send it, do whatever, because that's, we are very excited to have actually be building a relationship with workers who are actually calling for nationalization of the industry in a major, super important U.S. industry, like I said. So yeah, solidarity to those workers. Shout out to them, and I hope people can stay focused on what's important here, which is the workers, and and using this event to show people the contradictions of capitalism and the contradictions of imperialism, and get people to organize and call for nationalization like that. Now, do I think the government and Biden will nationalize the rail industry? Of course not. The government is a dictatorship of capital. Now, if the rail workers said, you know what, even though Biden said we're not allowed to strike, and for those who don't know, Biden said the rail workers can't strike. We're making it illegal for them to strike because it's such an important industry, and the entire economy would shut down if they did, right? So therefore they can't. We're enforcing this as the government. Perfect example of how the government works as a dictatorship of capital, a tool of suppression for the capitalist class, the railroad companies, to suppress the rail workers and prevent them from engaging in struggle that would better their lives. Biden. Okay, so Biden prevented them from striking. But hypothetically, theoretically, if the rail workers were organized and militant enough to say, you know what, Biden, we don't care if you made it illegal. We're going on strike anyways, unless you nationalize the rail industry, then they might have the power, right? Then they might, have the ability to threaten Biden and get him to actually nationalize rail, because rail is such an important industry. Like, think about it. Think how many goods are transported by rail that affect every different industry in the United States, right? Including things like coal that fuel other industries that are absolutely necessary for other industries to function. The entire U.S. economy would shut down if the rail workers went on strike, which is why Biden told them they can't strike, right? And this shows the power that workers have, especially industrial workers at the base of the economy. They have the power, if they're militant and organized enough, to threaten to shut everything down unless their demands are met. Now, I don't think, and this is based on my buddy, who, like I said, is very active in the rail union and is a rail worker, a very militant rail worker. I don't think the rail industry, the working class rail workers, have enough organization and militancy right now in order to do something like that, right? I don't think they have, I think they would be very worried about losing their jobs. They would be very worried about losing their wages for that period of time that they were on strike. They're worried about losing their livelihood. So there needs to be more organization and militancy and education on the ground in the rail industry in order to seize an opportunity like this, take an opportunity like this and say, guess what? You're going to nationalize rail. Otherwise, we're threatening strike, right? Because that's what you need to do. Like I said, the government and Biden, they are a dictatorship of the capitalist class. So if you just ask them to nationalize rail, they are going to say no, because that goes against the interests of the capitalist class who they serve. But if you threaten the dictatorship of capital, if the workers threaten to withhold their labor because they're organized enough to do so, and they have a strike fund set aside big enough to do so and help their workers survive while they're on strike, then you can threaten the government and make demands, which is how it has to work, right? But I don't know if we have enough education of the working class to the point where they know that yet, that they're going to have to threaten to withhold their labor, or make threats in order to get their demands met. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they know they won't be able to ask the government for anything. But I don't know if they have the strategy and the path and, like I said, the level of organization to go that direction right now. So I don't think it'll end up happening. But, it's still a huge step in the right direction. Like I said, it's a huge step in the right direction for the country. It's a huge step in the right direction for the class struggle. It's a huge step in the right direction for the rail workers. And it's a huge step in the right direction for Midwestern Marks, because we've, gotten in contact with the rail unions and we're helping them argue for this. We're helping, we endorsed their statement calling for nationalization because they asked us to. So, lots of great things happening in response to this horrific thing happening, right? This horrific contradiction of capitalism causing all these ill effects on the working mass. Is causing the working mass to get organized and get militant, which is, of course, what we need more of. And like I said, I hope everybody can stay focused on that, stay focused on the class struggle and what matters, and not get caught up in this political partisanship. Because, yeah, like I said, Biden's in Ukraine, so Trump went to Ohio and handed a bunch of stuff out. Clearly a PR move. Does this mean Biden's going to get in office and nationalize rail? Does this mean Trump will get elected and nationalize rail? Almost surely not, right? There's almost no way. Maybe he will call for that, which would be insane. But I highly doubt it, because ultimately, as a politician, he acted the same way as Biden, as a dictatorship of the capitalist class over the workers. So Trump going to Ohio here is obviously just a PR move to boost his campaign, right? But there are so many people who are digging their heels in and defending Biden because of this. Because Trump's doing a PR move, they're like, yeah, it's okay that Biden's in Ukraine, or Biden's doing the right thing because Trump is doing the wrong thing. No, the only reason that Trump was able to turn this situation into a PR move is because Biden is such a tool, such a puppet of the capitalist class, such a puppet of his shareholders and donors. If Biden was in Ohio right now handing out aid like he should be as the president of the United States, Trump wouldn't be able to do this. And that's not what Biden's doing. He's carrying a bag of cash created by the working mass of his home country to hand to the war effort in Ukraine, to hand to the NATO proxy war against Russia, which is the main priority of the U.S. government, even though their working people are suffering. Right. So I responded to this tweet from LOL Overruled, who is someone really cool I met from TikTok. They're like a public defense lawyer and a socialist, but absolutely unforced error on the Dems, effing morons. Like I said, they're morons. They allowed Trump to have this PR victory, this media victory. And I said Dems can no longer hide their disdain for the regular working people. Right? It's obvious to everyone now. It's obvious not only to people in Ohio, not only to rail workers, but to everyone, because this has become national news. And everyone sees that Biden's in Ukraine while this is going on in Ohio. And Trump just drew attention to it, which honestly is a good thing that Trump did. The fact that he drew attention to Biden being in Ukraine rather than in Ohio, I get that Trump's doing it as a PR move, but it opened a lot of working class people's eyes to what Biden is doing. So this person, Layla Donovan, anonymous account, says working people, 70% of this community lives on SNAP benefits and welfare, which there are a lot of working people who need SNAP benefits and welfare, right? Just because you're on SNAP doesn't mean that you just sit around all day collecting government checks, right? The rail companies don't pay a lot of workers enough to survive. They don't pay a lot of workers enough to feed their kids and pay for rent, so they have to go on welfare benefits, right? But when the Republicans go and hand out aid to this area where people are suffering. The Democrats are saying these aren't even working people. They're on SNAP. Like, what is going on? How far right can the Democrats go? How evil and disdainful towards the working people, the working masses of this country can the Democrats possibly be? I mean, this tweet is truly insane. Guess which company is actively working to cut those benefits? Or guess which company? It ain't the Dems. Meanwhile, that's not true. That's not true. Biden made it illegal for the rail workers to go on strike, which had to do with demanding benefits that were being cut while the companies were making millions and millions and millions of dollars. This has all gone on under Biden's nose, as have the series of crises and train derailments, including the one in East Palestine that poisoned a bunch of people. It's all happened under Biden. Meanwhile, the guy in the rail company paid to roll back safety guidelines and brought them Big Macs. Yeah, Trump deregulated the economy. Guess what? I'm not a Trump supporter. Whoa. I know this is really hard for people like this to understand. I don't like either of them. They both represent a dictatorship of the capitalist class and disdain for working people. When I say the Dems can no longer hide their disdain for regular working people, I'm not saying that Trump loves regular working people or he is a regular working person. No, I'm saying the Dems are so bad and so disdainful towards the workers that Donald Trump, the real estate oligarch, can appear as more pro-working class than Biden and the Democrats, who are absolutely useless and treat the working masses of their own country like they're just annoying rabble who aren't worth their time, when compared to the Ukrainian people waging a proxy war for them against Russia, at least. And I quote tweeted this, and go like this quote tweet, because this person needs to know how dumb what they just said was. But I say that the Dems can't hide their disdain for working people, and your response is to say that these aren't real working people because they receive SNAP benefits. Thank you for proving my point, Layla. Thank you for proving my point that Democrats hate workers. The Democrats do not give a shit about the working mass. And they'll defend anything the Democrats do, no matter how horrific, how imperialistic, and how anti-worker it is. Thank you. Also, I'm not a Trump supporter. I just wish our president cared more about Ohio than Kiev, Ukraine. That's how liberalism rots people's brains. That's it right there. You know, I think Joe Biden, instead of sending a bunch of money and weapons to wage a proxy war against another country, should use those resources to help the people of our own country who are right now poisoned because of his policies. And you're like, well, how could you support Trump? How could you support Trump? The Democrats are awesome. Pull your head out of your ass. I don't even know why I say that to liberals, because they're not going to. But yeah, that's the state of Democrats and liberalism right now. There it is. So yeah, here, by the way, is our endorsement of the rail workers. Moving on to better things, more important things than absurd Democrats on Twitter defending using all of our tax dollars on a proxy war instead of making people's lives better. I just sent the link. Actually, I think Carlos might have sent the link already for me. Thank you, Carlos. But here it is. The Midwestern Marx Institute wholeheartedly endorses the Rail Workers United resolution in support of public ownership and control of rail. So you can read it if you want. I'm not going to read the whole thing right now just because it's quite long. This was put together by our editorial board and approved by all of us. Me, Carlos, Thomas Riggins, Noah Kratchvik. Noah, I'm never going to learn how to say your last name. Sorry. Mitchell Jones, Colin Winchell. Everybody who's a part of our core editorial staff at Midwestern Marx was part of this endorsement. Like I said, it was for the railroad workers, which is so cool, such a step in the right direction that, you know, a Marxist pro-working class, pro-labor educational outlet, revolutionary educational outlet, is forging a relationship with the actual rail unions, right? To the point where they'd ask us for an endorsement is huge. huge and a sign of the times in the U.S. A sign of the that the level of class struggle is increasing greatly. But yeah, we're really excited about that. Although this situation is very sad, we know that sometimes the contradictions of capitalism have to intensify, have to get worse, which, unfortunately makes working people's lives worse in many cases like this, for working people to realize that we need a new system, right? We need a system that takes every last dollar that was sent towards proxy war in Ukraine, and destroying Russia and Ukraine, and overthrowing Ukraine's government in 2014 in order to create this proxy war. Every last dollar that was spent on that should be reinvested in the working people of our own country, right? Because capitalism is a society that works by and for the capitalist class, right? The capitalist class wants to take out Russia because they're threatening their global dominance. The U.S. government sends all their money and resources towards proxy war against Russia. Right? Capitalism is a society for capital with a government that works as a dictatorship of the capitalists. Socialism changes that society and turns it into a society that works by and for itself, by and for the working masses. So like I said, every single dollar that's spent on weapons in Ukraine and aiding the capitalist class proxy war should be reinvested in improving our society itself, improving people's day-to-day lives, increasing the amount of free time that people have, increasing safety regulations, improving our infrastructure, which is clearly crumbling, as we saw by the story today. Not only in terms of like our pipes and our water supplies, and you have famous stories like Flint, Michigan, of course, but also with rail, right? Also with the roads, with every aspect of our infrastructure, we're getting destroyed by China, for one, who does operate as a society by and for itself, a socialist society instead of a capitalist society. Yeah, I guess that's all. We're getting crushed by China. They're showing us an example of what reinvesting your country's surplus in your country could do. And instead, we choose day after day after day, or our government chooses day after day after day to use the country's surplus to hand out giant sums of money to shareholders and wage murderous proxy wars for their market interests abroad. And that's not going to change, until workers get organized enough, struggle enough to where we can make demands of the government, and eventually to the point where we can have a revolutionary movement that seizes the government, turns it into a socialist society, a society by and for itself, or a government by and for society, not one for the capitalist ruling class. Solidarity today and tomorrow, at home and abroad. Absolutely. At home and abroad. That's a good way to put it. One of the things I like, not one of the things I like, but one of the more interesting things about this issue is that it shows the connection between imperialism and capitalism. I should have grabbed Lenin's Imperialism before I started the segment. But it so clearly shows that imperialism is not just an action, right? Imperialism isn't only the proxy war in Ukraine, isolated from all other factors. Imperialism is a stage of capitalism. It is the highest stage of capitalism. So the fact that Joe Biden's in Kiev, Ukraine right now, while there's a crisis in East Palestine, Ohio, are directly related, directly interrelated, right? The shareholders and corporations that allowed the rails to deteriorate are the same ones who want to wage a proxy war for their global market and geopolitical dominance, right? So the reason Biden is spending all our resources on war, all the resources Biden's spending on war, all that he's spending on imperialism could be spent on building up our country. But instead, we put more and more and more and more of our resources towards imperialism and violence and controlling markets abroad, and less money on our own infrastructure and on our own people, which creates what Lenin calls in chapter 6 or something, the decay of imperialism, right? Because capitalism, once it hits its imperialist stage, once the capitalists go abroad and start trying to conquer foreign markets, they're spending all their resources and all the labor of that society on these imperialist wars abroad instead of at home. So at home, things start to decay. And that is exactly what we're seeing right now. And Biden being in Kiev, Ukraine, while people are being poisoned from the train derailment, really shows people, helps tie together for people the connection between imperialism and capitalism. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. It is the global economic system we live in. It is a system of imperialism, especially if you live in the West. So, yeah, the collapse of imperialism will go hand in hand with the collapse of capitalism. And the only way to actually take down imperialism is through class struggle. You know, we had our various opinions on the anti-war rally, right? The what was it called? Rage Against the War Machine, right? We thought that Marxists and socialists should have gone to that rally, but we said they should have gone to that rally to talk about class struggle, right? They should have gone to that rally to be like, you know, we can have as many rallies as we want, and these are great, right? And we can have as many journalists exposing these things as we want, and that's great. But until we get the working class at the base of society, until we get like the rail workers and all the workers in the important industries to realize this, to realize imperialism is a stage of capitalism itself, that the terrible working conditions of the workers are deeply connected to the proxy war being waged in Ukraine, until you can help people realize that and build up material forms of working class organization, we're not actually going to be able to stop the wars. Right? You can't stop imperialism without stopping capitalism. You can't stop capitalism without stopping class struggle. Therefore, the only way to defeat imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, is through class struggle. So this helps us make that point, helps people see that point, and it's an important point for Marxists to be making. Hey, everybody. Hey, Where Pilgrim. Good to see you. Showing my solidarity. If disasters like this keep happening, I wonder if people will get more violent. Thank you so much, Sparks. Really, really appreciate the $5 super chat there. Thank you for supporting our project. You can also become a member to our YouTube channel if you want. Some people were doing that earlier. It's basically like being a Twitch subscriber. Where you get like emotes and certain benefits. If you're a $10 Twitch member, you'll get a Journal of American Socialist Studies ebook. But either ways, showing my solidarity. Wonder if people will get more violent. Well, people will get more angry. People will be more displeased. People will be more militant. People will be more discontented with the government. You know, does that lead? It often does lead to violence. You know, the deterioration of the working class's conditions often does lead to violence. It leads, you know, people, disaffected people, to fall into violent right-wing movements and right-wing militias and groups. As well as, you know, causing the working class to become more militant in a left-wing way, right? In an organized and strategic way, which is what we want, right? We don't just want violence. The working class needs to be prepared to defend itself from the arms of the capitalist class that are going to try and crush it. But, you know, the goal is to not have people's rage and discontent just come out as blind violence, right? Senseless violence. We need to organize. Worker combinations, like working class political parties, unions, the workplaces. Get workers combined into groups where they can struggle together. Get them educated on the structure of the system, so that they can wage a strategic struggle in favor of their own interests and for socialism, which is their own interest. Not just, you know, blind violence, but yes, discontent, worker discontent and militancy will absolutely increase from this. So thank you for the solidarity and for the super chat. Appreciate that. Marxist Saw, how's it going, Marxist Saw? Great to talk to you. One of our absolute favorites in the chat here and in the Midwestern Marx Discord. But it says the people have to be made more class conscious so the corporate psyop can't continue to mislead them in circles about their inevitable antagonism they have with the capitalist class. Absolutely. And this is a much better and much more detailed way of saying what I was saying when I said we need to stay focused, right? We need to stay focused on the class struggle here when it comes to this issue, in the anti-imperialist struggle, rather than get distracted by the partisan hackery, the American political circus, the battle between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, right? Donald Trump is not equivalent to class struggle, right? If Donald Trump gets in office, like I said, it's highly, 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 highly unlikely that he nationalizes rail. And as even though Trump going to the site of the derailment, even him going to Ohio, even though that, you know, exposed Biden and showed the fact that Biden is in Kiev, Ukraine, when he should be in Ohio, and you know that was a good thing that resulted from Trump. The bad thing that results from it is there's a lot of people who think Trump is the answer, right? There's a lot of people who are like, yeah, this is why we should vote Republican instead of voting Democrat. No. This is why we should organize ourselves, right? The working class, the class struggle needs leadership for sure. It's always going to need leadership, but it needs leadership from within its own ranks, right? It needs working class leadership. It doesn't need leadership. It doesn't need some benevolent member of the capitalist class to go into office or get the presidency and fix everything for us. It's not even possible. So we need to keep people focused on the class struggle and draw their attention away from this partisan hackery that's bound to go on in the political circus. Because bourgeois democracy, the liberal political system, is very good at distracting us from class struggle. Some would say that's their entire purpose. Hello, Peta Mio. Welcome. Glad you could join us today. Both of the bourgeois parties are controlled by capital for capital. Facts. Simple as that. Thank you so much for becoming a member, Sith Celia. We're very glad to have you. Glad people are enjoying the new membership thing. Members also get priority when it comes to answering their comments, I believe is something. So shout out to Dustin who said Z. I'll give you a priority in that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that members get. I got to run to the bathroom quick, but I did want to read quickly our $10 Patreons and thank our Patreon supporters. So if you want to become a patron, it is patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. We got the $1, $3, $5, and $10 tiers where you can support us. You get benefits like Journal of American Socialist Studies and other things. And one of the benefits that you get is we'll read your name off during the stream. So shout out to A. Coco, Amazaline, Andrew Tibbetts, Anna Williams, Ariel, Benjamin Calvet, Brady, Bryce Rafa, Carlos Dell, Christopher Stamba, CJ, Cody, David Burney, David Rack, Debbie Ho, Dennis, DRRD, Elliot Cook, Gabe Glazer, Galactic Beyond, Gilly Trice, Glenn Goldman, Jorge, Hakan Klepp Norman. Sorry, that's someone's real name. I just can't pronounce it very well. Ian Snyder, Iraj Rafiq, Isaac Hohen, Jack Kelleher, Jeremy Bishop, Joseph Hoffer, Julia P., Christopher Busel, Laufo Kropotkin, Loafof Kropotkin, Lucas Meadows, Marvin Roman, Philip Gendralt, Semi-Anonymous, Sergio Puchetta, Seth, The Davy, Tiva, Tom Smith, Uncle Joey, Victorio, Witt, Xenon Tuning, Zachary Quesenberry, Katerina Strambio de Castilla, Luca Muccini, Adam Taufik. Oh, that's all of them. Some of those were actually $3 patrons. So thank you so much to all those Patreon supporters. Similar to the benefits that you get from being a Patreon supporter are very similar to the benefits that you get from being a $10 YouTube member, a $10 Twitch subscriber. I'm going to have to find a way to compile a list of our $10 YouTube members and Twitch subscribers so I can give them a shout out on stream as well, to make sure that all the benefits are the same across the board there. But yeah, it's how you can support us financially if you want. That's the reason we're able to do what we do and why our project has been improving in things like production value recently. So yeah, communism. Thank you, Dustin. Good point. Qasem Soleimani is a terrorist that killed many people and children. No, that's not true. In Syria, Iraq, and Iran, Qasem Soleimani did a lot to fight terrorism in those regions. And Yeah, not that he was like a communist or a socialist or anything, but the U.S. killing him was illegal and a horrific instigation with Iran, especially because Soleimani is a national hero in Iran. But yeah, I don't know why I answered that one. Go to the bathroom. I will willingly nomadic. I have to go so bad after I read this. That's why I subbed. Very cool. Very cool. Glad to hear it, Dustin. From what I've seen of your channel, the production value is top notch. I don't know about that, but I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm glad to see so much coverage of East Palestine issue on indie media. FEMA supposedly denying aid to the town's residents. Yes, that's true. Are they actually playing politics with people's lives? Absolutely. Absolutely they are. It's horrific to watch, even for those of us who are used to seeing stuff like this, right? Who follow politics closely. So I'm going to run to the bathroom here. Let me just play some video of me wrestling for y'all. So you have something to watch. I shall return quite soon. We gotta restart.
One on the right arm. One on the right arm. Let me get. Grab it. Chip. Ankle. Now look for your ankle. Look for your ankle. Throw by. Throw by. Yeah. Come on. Circle. Keep left leg. He's home. Good spin, Eddie. Good spin. No hand control. Tyler, come on. Push into it. Let's go. Control. Move around. Push forward. That's the one. Double is good.
Didn't have my mic on. Thank you for everyone who waited for me to go to the bathroom. Let me fast forward to the part of the match where I throw this guy. Woo, I did it. Yes, thank you. We didn't even lose that many followers while I was peeing, or that many viewers. Very cool. The media is very clearly gaslighting us about East Palestine, Norfolk Southern. That's the rail company. I should have mentioned that. Thank you. Must have some deep pockets to invest in all this damage control. Absolutely. I mean, they've been making billions off the labor of the workers, or millions and millions and millions, while cutting production costs and making the workers' lives worse. They're invested in marketing and PR and all these different things that they can do to make themselves look good, because they've got so many resources and so much money to do so. So why would they not? So yeah. It's crazy, the media response. I also did wrestling back in the day. Very cool. I know less than nothing about wrestling. However, I am heavily invested in this match. Of course he's wearing red. That's hilarious. Thank you. Yeah, speaking of wrestling, I had some sports or MMA or wrestling related news stories to cover today, actually. This one's pretty interesting. This one's shorter than the other one, but I just saw this on RT because there's this fighter who I like, Nikita Krylov. He's a light heavyweight fighter in the UFC. He's been around forever. But I noticed on his Wikipedia page, he is from Donetsk, right? He's from Donetsk, Ukraine, part of the Donbass region, part of the region that has been under attack and has been having their homes shelled by U.S.-backed Ukrainian forces ever since the U.S. coup that overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, put in power an extremely anti-Russian right-wing pro-U.S. government, which then made groups like the Azov Battalion, a neo-Nazi militia, part of Ukraine's actual official military, so that they would have more resources and more weapons to attack the people of the Donbass. So that's where Nikita Krylov is from. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what he thinks about the war. I wonder what he thinks about the Russian special military operation, because a lot of the people in the Donbass region, it's eastern Ukraine near the border of Ukraine and Russia. A lot of them consider themselves ethnic Russians. A lot of them speak Russian. A lot of them consider themselves to be more Russian than they were Ukrainian. A lot of them wish the Soviet Union never fell, actually. So I was surprised to see he was from this region. And it's no surprise that he often carries two flags when he goes to fight. When he's like doing his entrance and his walkout, or he'll go back and forth between the Russian and Ukrainian flag. Because a lot of people in that region, like I said, consider themselves to be ethnically Russian. By the way, after the U.S. overthrew Ukraine's government in 2014, the right-wing puppet government banned the Russian language. Right? They banned the Russian language, and they named Stepan Bandera a national hero, who was a collaborator with Hitler, neo-Nazi Ukrainian nationalist from World War II. So that's just an example of like the blatantly anti-Russian policies that were enacted on people in Donetsk. It's just interesting. Obviously, this is RT, Russia Today. You can take it with a grain of salt or whatever, but it was interesting to hear him speak on the Russia-Ukraine situation. So here he explained his reluctance to speak on it. Right? Normally, with a lot of these Ukrainian athletes, with Vladimir Klitschko being a famous heavyweight boxer from Ukraine, who's literally the leader of one of these political parties, one of these right-wing political parties, like literally deeply involved in politics. I'm sure he's just a figurehead because he's famous, but they have utilized all the Ukrainian athletes to do propaganda for the proxy war, to generate public support for the proxy war. What's the other guy's name? Lomachenko. Was he the other one? I don't know. There have been a ton of Ukrainian athletes doing like propaganda campaigns. Like they'll take pictures of them in Ukrainian military gear with a weapon. They'll be like, look at these Ukrainian sports stars fighting for their country's freedom. So Nikita Krylov hasn't been doing that, which probably makes sense if you consider the fact that he's from Donetsk. But he said he was born in Lugansk, which is another part of the Donbass. He's carried both Russian and Ukrainian flags on his past entrances to the octagon. He's fighting again soon. Even if it were interesting for me to develop this topic, the war, I understand that there will be people with a different opinion, and there will always be an opposite side. And this will cause a lot of negativity. Why make people feel negative? So even though it's massively popular in the West, where the UFC is located and where he fights, to just say, yes, I support the Ukrainian people. They're fighting for their freedom. They're fighting for their sovereignty. The idea that there was a U.S. coup in 2014, that's a Putin conspiracy theory. And everything going on in Ukraine right now is good and just. And we just have to keep sending money and weapons to the Ukrainian people. That's the mainstream opinion in the U.S. that a lot of Ukrainian athletes are saying. But this guy is saying, there's going to be an opposite side to my opinion. So why would I say that? Potentially because he's from Lugansk and Donetsk. Potentially because he knows that the Ukrainian forces have been shelling the homes of people who he grew up with since 2014. And that the Donbass region, Donetsk and Lugansk specifically, asked Russia to intervene 10 times before Russia actually did. He probably knows that, but he probably knows he's going to be lambasted by the media and probably blackballed from the UFC if he says that about his home country, about his hometown that the U.S. has been destroying since 2014. So he just chooses to keep his opinions to himself. That's my suspicion. It's best to keep your opinion to yourself, then, he said. It is clear that I have only one topic in my head, and I don't want to voice it. But everything that is happening in the media right now, for some public people, 60-70% is just drawing attention to themselves. They are not so interested in changing something as expressing an opinion, drawing attention. I have no desire to draw attention to myself. Pretty interesting. Speaking separately, Krylov did touch upon how the conflict in the Donbass region, where Russia recently recognized the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, had hit close to home, with some of his family remaining in the city in Lugansk. The situation is really difficult, but I'm glad that my wife and child are safe. Okay. Most interesting part here, right? So there's not a ton of evidence yet, that he supports the Russian special military operation or supports Donetsk and Lugansk in their struggle for sovereignty and, against the US-backed fascists. But he says this then, what worries me the most are the explosions from missiles in Donetsk and Makeyevka. The number of victims. This mood has persisted for 8 years. So I can't say that something is happening now that's new to me. This is basically him saying, that Donetsk and the Donbass have been shelled by the Ukrainian military, have been shelled by this U.S.-backed puppet government for 8 years. And like I said, in the U.S. media, they pretend that that's a conspiracy theory, right? They pretend like that's not going on. And anybody who says that the U.S. did a coup in 2014 that started, that allowed or pushed the government to start shelling homes in the Donbass, that's a conspiracy theory. All right, but here's this guy from Donetsk who doesn't even want to take an opinion on it, being like, what worries me most are the explosions in Donetsk. Right, are the explosions that have been happening for 8 years. So ever since the U.S. coup, he knows that the U.S. overthrew Ukraine's government, which caused a lot of neo-Nazi, ethno-nationalist militias to take power of Ukraine's military and political apparatus, which has led to 14,000 deaths in the Donbass region and the destruction of infrastructure and homes in Donetsk and Lugansk, who, like I said, called for Russia to intervene 10 times. He knows. He's dropping a hint right here. He's just not going to share his direct opinion on it, because he knows if he says, I think the special military operation helped protect the people in the Donbass region in various ways. Or, I'm against the Ukrainian government because here's how they've been shooting missiles at civilians in Donetsk for the last 8 years. If he says that, the U.S. media is going to attack him. His ability to make money in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the heart of the empire as a UFC fighter, is going to be threatened. So he keeps it to himself. Crazy, though, isn't it? And as soon as I just looked this up when I saw he was from Donetsk, I was like, I just searched Nikita Krylov, Russia-Ukraine conflict or war or whatever. And this was the interview where he mentioned that Donetsk has been shelled for the last 8 years, not shelled by Russia, shelled by Ukraine. All right. So by him saying that, he's basically suggesting, putting out there how he feels about it for those who are in the know, right? For those who know the historical context of the situation, for those who know about the U.S. coup and the fact that this isn't, Putin propaganda, and for those who know about the U.S. proxy war and the shelling of civilian homes in Donetsk and Lugansk. He's dropping hints for those people. Eddie, I think you took one too many hits to the head, kid. You have no clue what the hell you're talking about, see? Well, you have no clue how punctuation works. The Y in you, if it comes after a period, needs to be capitalized. Come on, man. Oh, that's what you were trying to say. Yeah. Well, good point. Right. I never had thought about that I had taken too many hits to the head. I was just trying to engage with the facts, and the information. But maybe I will start assuming that everything I read is wrong because concussions I got in high school. This war in Ukraine is devastating for the proletariat there. Absolutely. The West is just pushing people at gunpoint, basically, to their death at the hands of Russia. That's what this proxy war is. the U.S. forcing Ukrainian people to trying to get the Ukrainian people to fight to the last Ukrainian. That's what the U.S. media apparatuses keep saying. Someone say they'd cancel him. Absolutely, Krylov would be canceled if he came out with that. If he came out with his opinions, if he came out in favor of Donetsk's sovereignty. Someone responded to that guy who said I took too many hits to the head and said, you've been miseducated regarding the war in Ukraine. You cannot trust the media on this. True. I'm sure that person means well, but sir, you have been lied to. Yeah. Ukraine wanted economic independence and was able to do so because of Russia in 2014. They paid the price. That's a good point. I never thought about that, Christopher. I never thought about what economic policies Ukraine was enacting that got the U.S. to do the coup. I mean, I know there was a more pro-Russian president who didn't want to ban the Russian language, didn't want to make Stepan Bandera a Russian hero. A Ukrainian hero. They didn't want to enforce all these Ukrainian nationalist policies. So I knew that was part of it, but there's always economic reasons for U.S. regime change efforts, and probably more so even than just, Russia is growing as a global economic superpower and threatening U.S. dominance. There's probably even more specific reasons than that really put the coup into motion. But howdy, Eddie. Big fan of your content. Thank you, Chris. Hope you are doing well. I am. Hope you're doing well, too. Also, my birthday will forever be the anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. That's unfortunate. That is unfortunate. You can always remember, though, that the war in the Donbass started well before Russia invaded. The war in the Donbass started in 2014 with the U.S. coup. So it was only an escalation of the war with the Russian special military operation that is on the anniversary of your birthday. So there you go. Happy birthday. Happy late birthday, though. This war is much similar to the Balkan Wars, now that I think about it. Well, yeah, and they're interrelated because, the U.S. destroyed or helped dismantle and foment constant fighting in nationalistic fighting between different nationalist groups, including ethno-nationalist groups and groups like the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, who the U.S. formerly called a terrorist group before taking them off that list and giving them a bunch of arms and weapons. But, destroying Yugoslavia, dismantling Yugoslavia and stationing more NATO troops there than any other place on earth, which is still the case to today, really, really pushed NATO towards Russia's borders, which is what Russia has been saying. You need to stop doing that. Otherwise, we're going to retaliate. The U.S. didn't stop doing that. And now here we are. But yeah, it's very related to the NATO carpet bombing of Yugoslavia and all the IMF, World Bank, Western regime change efforts and destabilization efforts that took place in former Yugoslavia, in the Balkans. So, yes. So that was a little bit of an interesting story about an MMA fighter. Kind of random, not the normal thing. Since we're talking about sports and politics, I want to show you all this hilarious video I saw called Joe Buck of Fox Sports, who's an NFL commentator, commentates Hiroshima.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fox's coverage of an American bombing run on Hiroshima. I'm Joe Buck, and with me, as always, is Troy Aikman. It's a crisp August morning in southern Japan, and what goes better in the morning than Dunkin' Donuts? America runs on Dunkin'. Japan's air defenses have been laughable in the last few months, Troy. Do you see them putting up any kind of a fight?
I just can't, Joe. Japan has been miserable recently, but they just refuse to quit.
It looks like we're starting here, so let's cut to the aerial coverage brought to you by Goodyear. Here comes the Enola Gay. It's about overhead of Hiroshima now. Gay, and he drops the payload. Let's take another look with the Toyota Instant Replay.
Looks like it only dropped one bomb, Joe. Can't expect it to do much damage.
You really can't, Troy. But what you can expect is for America to tune in to a brand new episode of The Simpsons, followed by a new Family Guy, only on Fox. And that was a massive explosion, Troy. Let's hear from Aaron Andrews down in downtown Hiroshima. Aaron, looks like we're having some technical issues with the headset. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
I thought that was hilarious. The AI voice technology is getting good. It's crazy. I watched a fake podcast the other day. It was like a fake Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson podcast where they were talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, holy cow, it really sounded like them too. Someone said, can you do a complete rundown of the Russia-Ukraine war? I mean, I just don't want to repeat myself a million times, which is kind of why I'm brushing over it right now. But we've done a whole bunch of stuff on it. One of the best video we have on it is probably Kayla Pop's hour-long Marxist analysis of the war in Ukraine. This is the best thing you can watch on it. Also watch Oliver Stone's movie, Ukraine on Fire. Fantastic movie. But make sure, you can watch that and then just search Midwestern Marx Ukraine, or just search our YouTube channel for Ukraine. Like, we've done so many videos explaining essentially what happened, the history, the political and economic history, the historical context, the war in the Donbass, how the coup happened, how they've denied the coup happening, how NATO expanded towards Russia's borders prior to the coup. All that in there. So yeah. Lula da Silva called Juan Guaido an abomination recently. Thanks, man. I got you. That's why we do what we do. So Lula da Silva, the Brazilian Workers' Party leader, and current president of Brazil, who defeated Bolsonaro, called Juan Guaido an abomination. Juan Guaido is obviously the fake president of Venezuela, who the U.S. tried to put in power multiple times, multiple coup efforts, declared him as the president of Venezuela, the interim president. They said, we're going to recognize him as the real president, which had many negative effects for Venezuela, because then a lot of the U.S.'s puppets and the U.S.'s allies around the world in West Europe and elsewhere, or like Israel, started saying that Venezuela is not a legitimate government. They're not a legitimate government because Maduro wasn't legitimately elected. You know, we legitimately consider this random guy in the street with no popular support at all, Juan Guaido, this abomination, to be the real president. So it hurt Venezuela economically. That prevented a bunch of countries from trading with Venezuela, prevented a bunch of countries from having, real alliance or a real relationship with Venezuela, because they're just kowtowing to the U.S. and following what the U.S. said to do. So even though Guaido is literally a joke, literally like a hilarious, laughable joke of a human being, and it's a joke that the U.S. just said he's the president now, it did have negative effects, right? It did hurt the people of Venezuela, in addition to the U.S. sanction regime and other things. So this is Lula saying that Guaido was an abomination. We've watched the videos multiple times of like Venezuelans attacking Guaido, like destroying him with chairs and things like that. So breaking news: Juan Guaido wins Brazilian election, declared leader of Brazil. Yes, Lula shouldn't have said that. Now Guaido's the president of his country too. Hilarious. Do you hear AMLO is leading an effort to free Cuba from the blockade? Yeah, AMLO's been doing a lot of interesting stuff. Just moving towards anti-imperialism and more towards socialism as time goes by. So Curious if you recommend a socialist party to join. Been thinking about PSL. Yeah, you do PSL. I'm a member of CPUSA. CPUSA needs a lot of work and a lot of improvement. So if you want to help us improve the party and turn it into a real party that expresses the interests and fights for the interests of the working class, you can do that. But just know that there's, a lot of stuff that needs to be improved before CPUSA is really effective. PSL, I feel like, is closer to being there, but my critique of PSL is that they focus a lot on like social issues. They don't always, just focus on the class struggle specifically and isolate that. They spend a lot of their energy and resources, it seems like, not all the time, but sometimes just tailing the Democrats, I feel like. But it's still a great party. Marxist-Leninist party, supports existing socialism, all that good stuff. So. Join the Democrats. Fox News says they're communists, so it must be true. Yeah, there you go. There you go. You can follow our great communist leader, Joe Biden. Joe Biden. When are we getting a Marxist or Midwestern Marx AI stream? Someday. Someday when we got cash money. When we get 1 million super chats and super stickers and Patreon supporters, I guess. I had something I wanted to talk about. Here, this will be.
Why
you want to
is
do
this
this segment? Because I've been planning this segment forever. It's probably the least political segment I've ever done. But I wanted to cover it because it's something I know quite a bit about, and it has to do with like geography and history and stuff. It also has to do with wrestling and MMA fighting. And we obviously have an MMA portion of Midwestern Marx, but it keeps getting banned by TikTok. So either way, I saw this video. Why are Dagestanis and Chechens so good at fighting? Okay, so Dagestan and Chechnya are in, I should have looked up how to pronounce it. It's like the Caucasus mountain region in Russia. And when they've been producing a lot of good fighters. So the most famous are probably Khabib Nurmagomedov, as well as his protege, Islam Makhachev, both of them UFC champions in the lightweight division from Dagestan. And then now we have this fighter from the same region from Chechnya, Khamzat Chimaev. And they are great fighters. Oftentimes they have long beards that kind of distinguishes them to the fans, like Abraham Lincoln style beards. And they're all from this very small region, this mountainous region where the main job of people in that region is just being a shepherd, right? So it's not a ton of industrialization, not a very I guess modern is the word, or, cosmopolitan society. It's sort of isolated, and it breeds very tough, very strong people. And folks are just now starting to notice this because of the popularity of the UFC. Because Khabib Nurmagomedov from Dagestan defeated Conor McGregor, the most famous MMA fighter in the West, and just absolutely destroyed him, crushed him, mauled him on the ground, and choked him out in the 4th round. Won almost every second of that fight. It made Dagestan very famous, and it made people curious, especially with the rise of Khamzat Chimaev. What is going on in this region? How are they producing these fighters? So I saw this video, and I wanted to give my own perspective on it after I play a few minutes of this video.
Why is this part of Russia so good at fighting? With Islam Makhachev defending his lightweight belt again against Volkanovski this past weekend, it got me asking a question that a lot of fight fans, I think, want the answer to. And it's why this part of Russia, specifically Chechnya and Dagestan, is so good at fighting. This tiny part of the globe has produced fighters such as Islam Makhachev, like I mentioned previously, but obviously you have the legend in Khabib Nurmagomedov and one of the best contenders at welterweight in Khamzat Chimaev. Obviously you have all of these elite wrestlers, but additionally you also have Artur Beterbiev, who is a great knockout artist in the light heavyweight division in boxing. And speaking of knockouts, a word from today's video sponsor.
Oh, hey guys, I didn't see you there. I was just sleeping on my Bear mattress. What's Bear mattress, you ask? Well, Bear mattress is a premium mattress designed to upgrade your sleep, improve your lifestyle. And
small part of the globe produce some of the most elite fighters.
That was the longest advertisement I've ever seen. The advertisement was like half the video.
fighters in all of combat sports. So before I get into answering this question, I wanted to define this region that we'll be focusing on, and that is the Caucasus Mountains, which is a mountain range that naturally separates Eastern Europe and Western Asia. This cold and high elevation region is home to two now world-famous Russian republics, Dagestan and Chechnya. I also wanted to mention that neighboring this region is also the country of Georgia, which also includes a great array of UFC fighters such as Merab Dvalishvili, Giga Chikadze, and Ilya Topuria, just to name a few. But in this video, we're going to be focusing on the aforementioned republics of Dagestan and Chechnya. So the reason why these two countries are usually paired with each other is because they have a very similar history. The Chechens of Chechnya and the Avars of Dagestan are both warrior people of this mountain range that are primarily Muslim. Both Dagestan and Chechnya are both republics of Russia today, but they were taken by force by the Russian Tsar Nicholas I in the mid-1850s. Both regions have also had histories trying to revolt against the Russian rule. Most of these revolutions came from the Chechens and included two Chechen wars that spanned from the late 90s all the way to 2009. And though these wars usually pitted Chechnya versus Russia, there's also a war of Dagestan in the middle of these two Chechen wars, in which the Chechens tried to take over Dagestan from Russia, but ultimately failed. Though these wars ended in 2009, until today, these regions are still breeding grounds for violence between the Chechens and the Russians. Because of this war and violence, many fathers during this time would put their children in wrestling programs. And the programs in countries that were formerly under Soviet rule are extremely elite because of the USSR's heavy focus on wrestling, especially during the 70s and 80s, where they're just winning so many.
So I had a wrestler from Clarion once. Oops, I almost exited out of the stream on accident. A wrestler from Clarion, this nice school in the US, D1 school, tell me that Dagestan and Chechnya, or even Georgia, these Russian republics or Eastern countries that produce all these great wrestlers and fighters, are only good at wrestling because they're former Soviet countries, right? Because they formerly belonged to the Soviet Union. He said this to me on Twitter, and I was like, what is the correlation there? I mean, yeah, the Soviet Union may be focused on wrestling, but wouldn't you say that the Soviet Union was good at wrestling because the Soviet Union contained Georgia, Dagestan, and Chechnya? So all the great wrestlers from those areas were wrestling for the Soviet Union in the Olympics and stuff. How is it the fact that those areas, how are the good wrestlers in those areas a direct result of the Soviet Union? Right? They're a direct result of their own hard work and their culture, that's always been, sort of in fighting and chaos and destabilized since the collapse of the Soviet Union during these Chechen wars, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The U.S. sent a whole bunch of mujahideen fighters, a whole bunch of terrorists to exacerbate these wars and make them worse. But, it's not just because of the Soviet Union that these areas have good wrestlers now. Someone said that about all of East Europe. That Clarion wrestler said that about all of East Europe to me. It's like they're only good because they were former Soviet republics. How is that how is the Soviet Union, which collapsed 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, the only reason that they have good athletes? Like, what are you talking about? It was just like the most, you could tell that guy thinks he's really smart, but he's just not. But anyways, so like the video says, Chechnya and Dagestan both have these long histories of producing like badass warrior people and being, in very violent states, similar to Georgia. And the reason people are now noticing this is because of Khabib Nurmagomedov. And this guy says later on in the video, Khabib Nurmagomedov was the first wrestler from this mountainous region to make it on the global stage, to really make it as a star. So I like this video. It's a good video, but that's not entirely true. In fact, that's not really true at all, because there have always been really, really great athletes, combat sports athletes produced by this region. Khabib was just the first one to get like real mainstream attention in the West, right, where wrestling isn't as popular as it is in the East, and where the UFC, MMA's really just exploded recently as the most popular combat sport. Largely thanks to Conor McGregor, who Khabib smashed, but not only because of Conor, but either way. There are a ton of Soviet and Russian wrestlers from this mountain region, the Caucasus, I don't know how to pronounce it, mountain region, that are some of the greatest of all time, right? So the reason I'm making this video and the reason I thought this was interesting was because I've known about this forever, my entire life growing up. Some of my favorite wrestlers and some of the ones I watched that my dad taught me about when I was very young, like Kuromagomedov, which was like, I was like 4 years old, and I would always tell people my favorite wrestler was Kuromagomedov just because I thought his name was funny. But I've been hearing about these guys forever, right? So the idea that it was just Khabib that kind of broke them through on the national stage is something I kind of want to combat here, kind of want to refute here, because he mentions that Sambo and wrestling were huge in Dagestan and Chechnya. But that means that these wrestlers, these athletes that were good for Dagestan and Chechnya were huge, huge stars in their own country, right? Khabib may be the first person to break through on the global stage, but when it comes to Russia, when it comes to the East, when it comes to this region, their wrestlers and their Sambo athletes are huge stars in their own country. So Khabib would just be kind of the first one who got popular among Americans for them. But definitely not like their greatest combat sports athlete ever, right? Just their most famous one. So you have, I should have pulled up pictures of all these guys, but you have Buvasar Satiev, probably the greatest freestyle wrestler in the history of the world. Probably the greatest freestyle wrestler to ever do it. He won six world championships and 3 Olympic golds. 3 Olympic golds in wrestling, which means, and in wrestling, your prime isn't very long, right? There's only so much time where you can beat down your body like that before you start to deteriorate and not be as good, just get old. So he, obviously the Olympics are spaced out by 4 years, right? So he was the best in the world for that chunk of 4 years. And then he won it again. He was the best in the world for that chunk of 4 years. And then he won it again. So he was the best freestyle wrestler in the world over a period of 12 years. And the Olympics happen every 4 years. The world championships happen in between the Olympic championships. So in between winning those 3 Olympic golds in 12 years and getting silver or bronze once to an American wrestler named Brandon Slay, he also won 6 world golds. Now, Buvasar Satiev, one of the years that he didn't win world gold, or 2 of the years that he didn't win world gold, and 1 of the years he didn't win Olympics, were when he sat out, didn't wrestle, so that his brother, Adam Satiev, also from Chechnya, could win 2 world golds and 1 Olympic title. So he took a year off to let his little bro win. So not only, are there that many great wrestlers produced in this small mountainous region, but even within the same family, sometimes you have multiple Olympic or world champions. There's also Albert Saratov, a Chechnya world bronze and Olympic bronze. Abdul Rashid Sajulayev, who I said Buvasar Satiev was probably the best freestyle wrestler of all time. Abdul Rashid Sajulayev is the best freestyle wrestler in the modern era, and he's quickly catching Buvasar Satiev. By the time that Sajulayev is done, he'll probably be the best wrestler in the world. He is from Dagestan, not Chechnya, but Dagestan, same place as Khabib. Best wrestler in the world today at any weight class. He's won 2 Olympic golds, 5 world golds, and he not only beat multiple times, but pinned Kyle Snyder, who is the greatest U.S. wrestler right now. So the U.S.'s best guy got pinned by this dude from Dagestan. Snyder beat him once, but he's lost like 5 times. And that guy's only 26 years old, Sajulayev is. So he'll be the best probably ever by the time he's done. So the 2 best freestyle wrestlers ever are from Chechnya and Dagestan, and one of them would have more medals, but he took a couple of years off to let his brother win. You also have Abdul Salam Gadisov, who probably wins the award for being the scariest looking wrestler of all time. This is what Gadisov looked like when he was competing. I think he was probably on the juice because his muscles eventually went away when they started testing a lot better. But this is the kind of people produced by Dagestan and Chechnya. This is the kind of build, at least. So I always just thought Gadisov looked insane. Ali Aliyev, 5-time world champ. I said Kuromagomedov's name wrong earlier when I was talking about him. It's Kuromagomedov. Kuromagomedov. Like I said, the first foreign wrestler I learned about because I thought my dad thought it was funny to hear me say his name all the time. He was a world champ and got world silver and bronze. He was a Russian Olympian and a 5-time European champ. Sharif Sharifov from Dagestan, who then went to Azerbaijan, where he was an Olympic and world champ for Azerbaijan. Also got a world bronze where he lost to Sajalayev, who was also from Dagestan. So you have people who leave Dagestan like Sharifov because they can't beat Sajalayev, and then they win, Olympic golds for other countries. So that's what we're talking about here with how good this region is at combat sports, that sometimes people have to leave the Dagestan or Chechenian Republic because they can't make the Russian team and go make someone else's team. You also have Magomed Ibragimov from Dagestan, who went to Uzbekistan. Same thing, left the country. He actually defeated Khabib Nurmagomedov in combat sambo in 2005 before winning an Olympic bronze, becoming the Asian Games champion, and winning the Medved, which is one of the best freestyle tournaments in the world. That list just goes on forever, right? Like, here's a list of the notable combat sports athletes, or the notable wrestlers from Dagestan. Hold on, where is it? And they have a lot of sports athletes anyways, but here's their famous mixed martial arts fighters. See, it's a very, very, very long list. Also have Muay Thai. And here are their good wrestlers. Look how long this list is. Right, so this isn't anything new. I know Khabib is the first one to get on like Americans' radars, or Islam Makhachev, who's the lightweight champion now. But they've been good for a long time. And this is Satiev. He looks very unassuming. Sajalayev, the best wrestler in the world today, he looks scary as crap. He looks like he's built like a tank. And actually, that's his nickname, is the Russian Tank. Satiev looked very weird. He just looked like a nice, like kind of skinny old man. But then he was just amazing. He was just impossible to take down. He was so good at wrestling. So yeah, thought that was interesting. And people always say, "Oh, you're critical of the U.S. proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. Why do you worship Russia? Why do you love Russia and Putin?" It's like, well, I don't love their government, and I don't have some like infatuation with Russia to the point where I would support them in any kind of conflict and think that they're always right, but I don't hate them. I don't have this blind hatred towards them where I'm like, yes, use all my tax dollars to destroy the Russian people, like liberals want you to think, right? Because I've admired Russian wrestlers since I was this tall. All right, I've been watching Russian wrestlers, and I realized that they're just regular people like we are in America. Right? They're just people with hobbies who work jobs and, have their own culture and their own goals and their own interests, just like we do in America. No, I don't want them to be killed through warfare, just like I don't want our people to be killed through warfare, which is why I was against, overthrowing the Ukrainian government and waging a proxy war against the Russians. I don't want their people to die. I don't want our people to die. I don't want Ukrainian people to die. But I don't know, because of wrestling, like, there's so much Russophobia and anti-Russia sentiment in the U.S. media and in the U.S. propaganda machine, right? And it's just something I've never, ever, ever, ever fallen for or fallen into, because I've always had admiration for the Russian wrestlers, right? I'm like, no, they're not just these evil, horrible people who want to destroy the U.S. A lot of them really love the U.S. Kyle Snyder and Abdul Rashid Sajalayev, the best U.S. wrestler and the best Russian wrestler, are buddies. Snyder goes to Dagestan all the time, and Sajalayev, they show him food and they show him the Russian culture, and it's very cool. So no, I don't want to destroy their people like the U.S. death machine wants me to. And then, when I say that, I'd be like, you are a puppet of Putin. You are just a simp for Russia. Like, okay, because I don't hate these people, because I don't want to blow these people up, use my tax dollars to blow these people up, and because I think they're good at sports, I'm a Putin simp. Sounds like you're just a psycho who wants to destroy Russia. Sounds like you just have a vendetta against Russia and you think they're evil and you need to relax a little bit. But thousands. So like I said, a lot of these fighters would have grown up in like a war-torn situation, a situation where they need to fight. The Second Chechen War only ended in 2009, and there were thousands of Mujahideen fighters killed. The Mujahideen were Osama bin Laden's terrorist group, who the U.S. gave a bunch of arms and support to in Afghanistan in the late 70s, early 80s. and they then spread and caused a lot of problems and destabilization elsewhere, like in Russia, for example, or in the Xinjiang region in Western China, where you have the ETIM, this basically group that splintered off from the Mujahideen. And the U.S. took them off the list of terrorist groups so that they could promote them destroying things and causing problems in China. But like Khamzat Chimaev and Khabib Nurmagomedov and all these fighters would have grown up in this, right? They would have grown up around this. And of course, that makes them tough, right? That turns them into fighters. Growing up in such chaos with so much fighting. And yeah, if you want to read more about the U.S. funding of the Mujahideen and other violent extremist groups in Muslim majority regions, read America's Jihad, A History of Its Origins by Christian Parenti, son of Michael Parenti. And I'll send a link to that right now. Or read the book Washington Bullets by Vijay Prashad, where he says that the CIA had a document called Hope Lay in the Muslim Revival. And basically what they tried to do is look at any Muslim majority region on earth that was moving left, that was moving towards a more socialistic economy, and try and funnel arms and money into right-wing groups in that region, which oftentimes ended up being extremist terrorist groups like the Mujahideen. So this had lasting effects on all these regions. The Chechen wars and the war in Dagestan were definitely one of those lasting effects, or were worsened by the U.S. Supporting of extremist groups. And yeah. And different cultures breed different athletes, or different kinds of athletes, which is interesting. And like, you know, the Dagestan and Chechen republics aren't that much bigger than like a handful of U.S. states, right? Like it might be the size of the Midwest. And you see similar things in the U.S. Like wrestling's not very popular in the South, where it's not freezing cold in the winter because there's more to do in the winter. You can go outside, but in the Midwest, it's pretty popular because during the winter, you know, there's not really anything better to do than go wrestle inside in a wrestling room. Versus if you're in Louisiana, you're going to miss out on a lot of cool stuff if you go out for your school's wrestling team. That you still should if you're in Louisiana, but and you know, even between like states in the Midwest, like Greco-Roman wrestling is a lot more popular in Minnesota and Wisconsin than it is in Iowa. So you even have different cultures that breed different kinds of athletes in different state regions. Yeah. Very, very cool and interesting. I appreciate everyone who bared with me through that. I know it's not what we usually talk about. I know it's probably not what everyone came here for, but sometimes I just like to tell y'all about or just ramble about wrestling, because I've studied it since I was in kindergarten and before kindergarten when I was like 1. And I have like an encyclopedic knowledge about wrestling. So sometimes I want to use that. There you go. I don't know. Isn't Campbell a big wrestling school? They're one of the worst Division I wrestling schools in America. But they had a coach, Kerry Colott, who was a very famous American wrestler, a very good American wrestler, who now is a coach at Navy, I believe. Your contents are good. Thank you. You're from Iran, right, Fallenberg? Iran wrestling is bigger in Iran too. Speaking of how different cultures promote different sports, and if you think about sports in the U.S., like in neoliberal societies, it's always spectator sports, right? That only certain people can participate in. Right. So it's sports that are based around consumerism. Like football is great because it has a lot of breaks, right? There's like 30-second breaks, or there's like a 30-second break for every 7 seconds of playing. That's advertising time, right? Advertisers can hop in during the 2-minute warning or whatever else and make a ton of money during the 3-hour football game, which a huge portion of America is watching. So football allows them to keep a captive audience, which they can smash with ads and, you know, imperialist U.S. military propaganda for 3 hours straight every weekend. Similar things with basketball. You know, you only have 5 people in a basketball game, and individual sports stars, individual stars are able to take their teams to new heights often and help their teams achieve victory, promoting individualism. So the kind of sports that are promoted in neoliberalism, in neoliberal societies, oftentimes are sports that work well for capitalism, that work well for the capitalist class, that work well as a tool. Versus in like regions that have been torn by war, like Dagestan and Chechnya, without a whole lot of industrialization and, you know, material comforts for their people, compared to the U.S. or like, you know, elsewhere, places in the East for the most part. Sports like wrestling are more popular. So. Like the Pat Tillman thing during the Super Bowl, his family hates that foundation. That was insane, wasn't it? They literally brought up Pat Tillman. They try and, you know, use his name for war propaganda. When Pat Tillman was an NFL player who enlisted in the army and was sent to Iraq because he wanted to help, quickly realized that the U.S. were not the good guys in Iraq. They were the bad guys. Started telling people about it. Started saying, this is not what I came here for. We're killing women and children, and we're doing this for oil oligarchs. And then his own squadron killed him. They massacred him. They shot him, and they said it was a friendly fire incident. Whoops. We accidentally murdered the guy who's critical of the war and who was an NFL player, so the media is actually going to listen to him. Whoops. Accidentally friendly fire and bullshit. And then they try and use him for propaganda. Like, how sick and disgusting is that? But yes, exactly. That's exactly how the NFL works. And then you had the Eagles coach was like crying when they were like singing the national. It was Chris Stapleton singing the national anthem. It's like, you know, he's just crying. The troops, they keep us so safe. And, you know, I am in favor of the troops, but the troops are being sent to fight and die and get PTSD and have no health care when they come home for oil oligarchs. Right? And for shareholders on Wall Street. That's what essentially the U.S. military is fighting for. Sorry, that's just the reality. And then this football coach is crying about it on the Super Bowl, and all of America's like, oh, God bless our troops. You know, I'm going to send all my money to Ukraine to help the troops or whatever. And yeah, that's how it works. That's how they use spectator sports to propagandize people. Dude, you sound like you hate Iran. Do you work for the NED? Oh, this person. I thought you were talking to me. That's interesting. Okay, one of those things isn't true. Nick Sirianni. Yeah, that's the guy's name. Books about a planned economy in English. Long, almost all very bad or shallow. Have you read Towards a New Socialism by Cockshot? And also keep in mind that people don't really talk about economic planning in the West. So like Dr. Paul Cockshot's very, very good. He's very, very intelligent, and he writes about economic planning, but he needs to lay out the basics for people because most Americans don't even understand economic planning, or they're terrified of it. Or they have all these misconceptions. There's this idea promoted by neoclassical economists in the West called the ECP, that economic planning is completely impossible and there could never be a planned socialist economy. It's a stupid ass idea, but it has to be debunked by anybody and get, you know, talking about planning. So there's just like, you also have to write, you have to do your scholarship. If you're a Marxist who actually wants your scholarship to be useful for the working class, you have to write things in a way where they lay out, you know, the basics of things, which, you know, those who are well read and really understand that topic might consider to be shallow. So I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I literally live in Iran. It's very bad here. The amount of capitalist oppression is much more even in the United States. Well, how would you know it? Like, I could say the same thing, though. You get me? Like, I could be like, I live in the United States. Trust me, the capitalist oppression is worse here. I get, you know, I don't blame you that there's, I don't deny that there's bad things that are going on in Iran. And I've covered the workers' strikes and the workers' uprisings in Iran. But, I don't agree with this identity politics issue of I have this identity, I belong to this identity group, therefore I can speak for all of them. And also, as Americans, you have to understand it's different too, because if our government wants war with Iran, our government is sanctioning Iran, which is, decreasing the amount of medical supplies that get in. There have been countless studies done and found that U.S. economic warfare is directly killing Iranian people and Iranian children, right? So that's where our main focus goes in terms of Iran, is arguing against stuff like that, and arguing against U.S. regime change efforts, which, no, Iran's government isn't perfect, but neither was Iraq's government. But look at what happened to Iraq after the U.S. invasion. It became a disaster. ISIS was created. The U.S. ended up occupying for the next 20 years. Iran would be a very, very similar situation, which is why I'm against the execution of Soleimani, like we were talking about earlier, because that is a massive escalation with the Iranian people, right? And what I love about Iran isn't, necessarily their government. It's their people, it's their wrestlers, it's their workers, right? That's where my solidarity lies with Iran, not with any kind of government apparatus. That being said, as Americans, we have to be very, very careful, tread very, very carefully when we talk about Iran, because we need to understand that our government wants regime change. So me, as a commentator, as someone who talks about geopolitics, I can't just come out here and talk about how bad Iran's government is all the time, because I would be giving support, manufacturing consent for regime change that would make the situation in Iran much worse were it to be carried out. I've noticed that guy saying a handful of things about Fallenberg, saying a handful of things about Iran, so I just figured I'd address them all real quick. Israel is begging for a reason to destroy Iran. Yeah, that too. I didn't even mention Israel. After they assassinated an Iranian general who was fighting ISIS, literally. And Israel's constantly attacking Iran. Anyone know why the hammer and sickle became the symbol of the Soviet Union and why communists don't use it quite as frequently anymore? I don't know, but I hopefully this doesn't get me removed from YouTube, but I got to show y'all my tattoo. Because some Western communists still use the hammer and sickle. Ugh. Dang it, I got to get rid of this comment. Sorry. There it is. My tattoo. I don't know why. I think it's like, I like the hammer and sickle, but it's got that negative connotation around it in the US, where we've had years of McCarthyism and anti-communist brainwashing. So there's a lot of people who are terrified of communism, and they associate communism not with, the workers being in power, but just something that could never work, or government dictatorship, or authoritarianism, totalitarianism. All these things were beat over the head with. So I think that's why you don't see the hammer and sickle as much, although I wish Americans would embrace that more, because there's an MMA fighter, Andre Petrosky, who has the hammer and sickle on his ribs, and nobody thinks anything of it, really, when he fights in the UFC. Everyone just kind of thinks it's cool. And he's like, I don't even support the Soviet Union or whatever, even though that's where his ancestors are from. But I just think it's I just think the symbol represents the working class, and he also says the Russian people. Here's a good picture of it. I'm trying to zoom in on it for you. So there's Petrosky. You still can't see it. Hold up. So I don't know. I just feel like the hammer and sickle, most people know, that represents the workers, right? Because it's the tools that the workers use to do agriculture and industry. That's what stupid ad. Oh, well, that's what the hammer and sickle originally represented: the agricultural workers with the scythe, the sickle, and the industrial workers with the hammer, the workers in the country and the workers in the city. And I think that would be a great slogan, or a great thing to organize people around in the U.S., right? We need the agricultural workers a lot of whom are immigrants and have their labor super exploited in the countryside, and the industrial workers in the cities. So yeah, I don't know. I like the hammer and sickle, and I feel like it has less of a negative connotation as, like, I don't know, communism in general in the U.S. So what do we want to do about organizing with the right? So what do we want to do about organizing with the right domestically? I think we have to do what Noah said, right? Not necessarily try and organize with, the right wing or with liberals or with libertarians or whatever. We try and organize the working class, and we understand that we can work together with other organizations, right? We can put on a peace rally with a libertarian organization or whatever else, but our organizations themselves, still have very high standards, right? You have to be educated in theory. You have to be you have to be a socialist. You have to support class struggle. You have to be anti-imperialist if you're going to be in our organization, right? Nobody's saying that all the socialist pro-working class organizations should just open their doors to everybody, right? Should just be like, anybody who's like supports MAGA, like, now we're against the war in Ukraine, so we're the same thing. Join our organization. No, the socialist and communist parties should still be socialist and communist parties for socialists and communists. But if there's another organization of people with different principles, but you both agree on one of those principles, like anti-imperialism, sure, do a war. Do a war. Yeah, sure, go to war with them. No, sure, do an anti-war rally, right? They should be aware the goal of our organization when we're at this anti-war rally is going to be to teach people about class struggle, right? And we don't necessarily want to do this if you're going to just be bashing class struggle and bashing the working class and bashing socialism, right? Maybe it's not worth it for us to do a anti-war rally. But, if our communist organization feels like we can team up with a libertarian organization, and overall it'll have the effect of bringing more people towards communism and pushing the anti-war principle, why not? We just got to be strategic about this shit. Like, some leftists are more worried about being the most moral and the most pure rather than, just doing what needs to be done to get socialism and put the working class in power and make people's lives better. It's unfortunate that the hammer and sickle has been misrepresented by capitalist propaganda as powerful symbolism. You are correct, my friend. This is why I think we should bring it back. And that's why, I don't have communist tattooed on me. I don't have socialist or Marxist or whatever, because, my adherence ultimately isn't to an ideology or to Karl Marx. It's to the working class, right? Which is socialism is the ideology of the working class. And Karl Marx is the one who created it originally. And, it's since grown and branched off and developed for years and years and years. But the hammer and sickle just represents the workers, right? The workers themselves, the agricultural workers, the industrial workers. And you could add today, the service workers and transport workers and all sorts of things. But that symbolism is really, really powerful, right? You have the major productive workers in the countryside, the sickle, and the major productive workers in the cities, the industrial workers with the hammer. And I think people realize that's kind of what it means, although it, like you said, it has been misrepresented by propaganda. But maybe we just popularize the hammer and sickle more, so the capitalists, can't keep demonizing it. I don't know. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe it's not. But I agree that the symbolism is powerful and that we should take that symbol back. I think it's good. Eddie supports leftist infighting. Confirmed. Yes. Absolutely do. I just want to infight. Right. There shouldn't be any leftist infighting. We should agree with everything that Joe Biden and the liberals say, because, the liberals and the communists are both leftists. So we should agree on everything. Just kidding. That's sarcasm. I've had a few, like, my family growing up, I've realized this was really, really sarcastic. We use sarcasm a lot in our humor and just in our communication, but not everybody does that. Not every culture does that. Not every person does that. and not everybody then understands sarcasm. So there are people who have told me like, I don't really understand, like it confuses me when you use a lot of sarcasm in your videos because I can't tell that you're being sarcastic. So I've tried to recently start mentioning, just saying out loud, I am being sarcastic here. But organize the oil executives. Yes. You honestly believe we're all going to go extinct in 3 years? No. Did someone else say that? I didn't say that. It's not misinfo. Oh, is someone else saying it? The big oil manufactured nihilism. Do you have a hammered sickle tattoo? Yes. Oh, people are saying that climate change is going to destroy the earth in a handful of years. I mean, I'm not even going to get into that debate because I'm not a scientist, but I have taken one class on, it was basically a science and politics class mixed, specifically focused on the environment and climate change. There are a lot of, like you said, feedback loops that have been interrupted, or a lot of the Earth's natural processes that have already been interrupted, and a lot of bad feedback loops. But I don't think there's anything that says we have 3 years. I think they say in like 10 years, we might hit a point of no return, or I don't know. There's a lot of different theories, right? It's up in the air. And with anything in science, it's constantly, our analysis and conclusions can constantly change based on changing evidence, especially when it's something that's developing constantly, like climate change. So I don't think my initial inclination is to not want to put a specific number on it. Like we have to do this by then. Right. So, but I don't mind people having the conversation, of course. Not you, Eddie, making these claims. Yeah, I got you. Amazon dieback was a direct existential threat. Interesting. China's focusing a large part of their next economic development on society living in harmony with nature. Very cool. Yeah, that's been a part of their thing. Like Huey P. Newton, actually, I never read this, but Carlos told me this because he read Huey P. Newton's book. But I think he went and visited China, and China was like, "What are your critiques of us? Give us your critiques so we can improve." And Huey P. was like, "Well, you guys don't have anything. Like you're doing a lot of great stuff here. You're industrializing, and all this is great. But what about the environment? Do you have plans for the environment?" And they're like, "Oh, yes. Here's our plans." They had all these like detailed ideas and plans for how to protect the environment, live in harmony with the environment, with their economic planning and stuff like that. So shout out to China, man. They be awesome. What was I gonna say? You talk about Nord Stream. Yeah, Julian, have you seen our videos about Nord Stream? We've done full videos about Nord Stream. Carlos and I did a full stream talking about Nord Stream. And like we predicted that Nord Stream was the US, obviously, because it wasn't hard. We talked about how we predicted it, how just by paying attention to the historical context, like we could tell that we knew that Russia didn't blow up their own pipeline, and the US had constantly been threatening to blow up the pipeline. So of course it was them. But then we covered the Seymour Hersh article that came out about it recently. And I just sent the link in the chat. Was that the right one that I sent you? Yeah. So, and then here's another one. So I also did a handful of TikTok videos, which I edited together into a YouTube video talking about like Philip DeFranco and a lot of the mainstream coverage of Nord Stream, a lot of the liars about Nord Stream. So what's interesting is Philip DeFranco has like hundreds of thousands of followers. He's been a famous YouTuber since I was in like middle school. And now he's just become like a neoliberal propagandist, right? All he does is talk about how we need to send more weapons and money to Ukraine, how, everything the US and NATO are doing is right and good, and how evil these Eastern countries are, like Iran and Russia and China, and how we need to spend all our resources attacking them. That's all that Philip DeFranco talks about. He's just a pure propagandist. So in my video that I just sent in the chat, I after the Seymour Hersh thing came out about Nord Stream, I said, look at what Philip DeFranco's coverage of Nord Stream has been. Right? Not only has Philip DeFranco been saying that it was 100% Russia that blew up their own pipeline for some reason, never explaining why they would want to do that, and never addressing the fact that Biden had threatened to do it multiple times. But then people in his comments were saying, why would Russia blow up their own pipeline? And he was mocking them. He was mocking anybody who was suggesting that the U.S. might have done it, and not only calling them stupid, but calling them conspiracy theorists and puppets of Putin. Right? So not only is he lying to hundreds of thousands of children on TikTok and filling their heads with pro-war propaganda, but then he's mocking the people telling the truth. Right? Anybody who's telling the truth is just an idiot who's not an enlightened neolib like him. And our TikTok account, our 7th TikTok account, got permabanned after that. After I made that video explaining about the Nord Stream thing. Permabanned, wiped off the map. All of our videos gone, unable to get back in, unable to even appeal the ban. Right? Our 7th account that they've done this to. And Philip DeFranco's account is still up. Right? It's still up, and his video about Nord Stream claiming that it was Russia is still up. Right? So you are allowed to spread blatant lies, blatant disinformation and misinformation, then accuse the people who criticize you and call you out about it of being the real misinformers, the real disinformation spreaders who are in the pocket of Putin somehow. I have no evidence for this, but we can just accuse them of it. And then the people telling the truth get taken down, whereas the people telling the lies get boosted. Right? And that's what Philip DeFranco is. He's a liar and a propagandist. And TikTok is facilitating. It's essentially a massive propaganda machine, facilitating the brainwashing of the American youth through the likes of Philip DeFranco and through banning and perma-banning all of the accounts of people like us, which, for those who don't know, the people who manage the content over at TikTok are former NATO and national security operatives. So literally imperialists just deleting people like me all day and boosting people like Phil. So I hope it's worth it, Phil. I hope it's worth it to be popular and get fat checks from TikTok and tell the news, because you're cheering on the death of hundreds of thousands of people. You're cheering on destruction. You're cheering on murder from your comfortable studio in LA or whatever. So you're a piece of shit. I hope you know that for real, Phil DeFranco. If there's an afterlife, you will be punished for what you did in this life. You ain't going to the good place. Ultimately, it makes no sense why Russia would even do that. Absolutely. Why would they do that? Anybody with a brain cell can tell Russia didn't blow up their own freaking pipeline, and that Biden had been threatening to do it over and over and over again. Of course he did it. Of course it was the U.S. Not to mention the U.S.'s freaking 100-year-plus history of doing shit like this. Like, duh, how stupid would you have to be? But that's the thing. DeFranco's not even just stupid. He's a liar. He's a propagandist. He knows he's lying for NATO. He's probably receiving checks from some NGO, non-governmental organization connected to the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, in the U.S. State Department, which is why he's a piece of shit. And I will at him when I highlight this and clip this. That's Mr. Misinformation to you. That should be his name. Amen, Eddie. Thank you. And I know I get frustrated when I talk about individuals, which is why I usually try and make my analysis more structural rather than hyper-focusing on individuals. But when you have an individual like that, like Philip DeFranco, who got to start making vlogs on YouTube, and now he's become a NATO propagandist because it's profitable, Like, I'm sorry, I just have no respect for you as a human being, and it angers me that you have such a place of prominence in our society. And I see your place of prominence in our society, Philip DeFranco, as an ill, as something that I'm ashamed of. I'm ashamed that I live in a society where people like you have your content boosted. And, you know, I'm not super like spiritual, or, you know, I don't talk about things like that, but we only have one life, right? You only have one life in a very limited amount of time. Okay, so I've taken a lot of financial hits because I choose to talk about what I choose to talk about, right? Because I choose to be an anti-imperialist. I've had to reject a job with the Biden administration, reject a job where I would have been working for an NGO helping to spread democracy around the world, right? Rejected all these jobs, got fired from jobs. Had people contacting my employers at every job I've been at since I started doing this, begging them to fire me because I'm evil. I've taken a lot of financial hits for doing this, but I don't give a shit, right? Because living in the world that I live in the highest stage of capitalism, in the state of imperialism, where my tax dollars and the surplus value of my labor is being used to wage a proxy war, getting thousands of people killed in Ukraine every day, right? I don't really care about my own finances as much as I care about living a life where I fight against that system. Living a life using all of my energy and my time while I am on this earth, which is very limited, to fight against that system and try and make it better and try and make it more rational, right? So for me, when I see Philip DeFranco, that's somebody who took a different path, the opposite path, right? That's somebody who sold out. That's somebody who could be suffering economically like me, who could be suffering personally in order to fight against the structure, the murderous, exploitative structure of this capitalist system. But instead, they sold out to the capitalist system, and now they're living a rich, comfortable life while they cheer on the death of thousands, while they cheer on the exploitation and the poverty of thousands. And I have no respect for people like that, people like Phil DeFranco. I think they're a waste of human life, and I think he's a piece of shit for that. Right? Because I could have done the same thing, right? I could have done the same thing. I could be on TikTok right now making short videos about why, you know, Biden's actually doing the right thing by being in Ukraine right now instead of being in East Palestine, Ohio, right? But I wouldn't be able to live with myself because I'm not a piece of shit who wants to spend my very limited time on this earth cheering on death and destruction and imperialist wars. But Philip DeFranco is, and that's why he pisses me off. What should alarm you is that countries that are already suffering from generations of exploitation will face increase in crisis, yes, and even collapse. Lakes will dry out. Oh, you're talking about environmental crisis still? Got a lot of interesting conversations about environmental crisis going on in the chat as I'm just ripping into Philip DeFranco's propagandistic NATO simp ass. Solidarity, Eddie. We're with you, comrade. Thank you, Christian. Yeah, what's really cool about TikTok banning all of our accounts, you know, the good thing about it is it hasn't stopped us, right? People still find Midwestern Marks. People find our streams. People find our YouTube. People find our website. People find our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, right? It's not just TikTok, because Midwestern Marks is nothing but a product of the material conditions. Right, the fact that me and Carlos, two people or two college athletes in Iowa, were compelled to start a pro-working class, anti-imperialist news outlet out of college is because of the stage of imperialism and capitalist imperialism that we live in. Right, the crises and the contradictions are getting worse. They're coming to a boiling point, and it's more and more obvious to young people like us. So they can ban as many of our accounts as they want. They can't stop the rising tide of the working class against the imperialist, warmonger murderers. And it's never been enough for him. DeFranco was always complaining that he wants more money. You're right. That was how he was, wasn't it? I never thought of it like that, but he's always been big on business, right? Building his business, building his brand, building all these different kinds of income sources. Because I used to watch Philip DeFranco in middle school before he even got into politics, right? So he realized he could create a news outlet, and that would just be a good source of income for him. Who cares if you're cheering on the death and the murder of millions and you're getting people like me banned for telling the truth and exposing your lies? It's a nice income source. That's all that matters. If you're a selfish capitalist piece of garbage like Phil. Are you part of any socialist organizations? I'm part of CPUSA. Yeah, I talked about that earlier. I like PSL and CPUSA. CPUSA needs a lot of work, though. We need to recognize that. So at least Vaush has like negative charisma, so it's harder to take him serious. Yes. Yeah, like not a lot of people like Vaush, actually. You know, most people think he sucks and he's a dick. People like Phil. People listen to Phil, and he's brainwashing the children into supporting mass murder. So, all right, y'all, I gotta head out. I'm going to watch my brother qualify for nationals, and I'm gonna coach him through that. So, wish me luck. It should be fun. Hopefully, I'll be back on Sunday. I have quite a bit of homework I have to do before Sunday, but I will try and get it all done. Look forward to our what was I gonna say? Oh, my new article about neoclassical and postmodern economics. You can support us on Patreon or become a YouTube member or Twitch subscriber. I'm sending real quick our Twitter account. So if you want to help Noah go to Philadelphia and meet with some of our comrades to give a presentation for Midwestern Marx, you can donate to the PayPal link on our Twitter. That'll help pay for Noah's travel and for his hotel. But either way, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate y'all hanging out with us. And solidarity forever.